That's
And the green light, speed. Let's see the top. Let go of it.
Yep.
Now if you tap it. So once you turn.
tap it with green.
Our third people competition of the of the year. We don't have a very large crowd here, so I am wearing a mask, but not wearing it right now because there's very few people in the clubhouse. Some announcements before we get started. The clubhouse hours, if you want to advance that. Announcements. We'll get the slides up here in a sec. Just take this off. Where's the clicker? Okay. All right. So again, tonight's people competition. There we go. All right. Again, some announcements. The clubhouse hours, we want to make sure you're aware with the COVID situation. We are going to be opening the clubhouse for all scheduled classes. They will be live in-person events, but will also be live streamed so you can watch them as they're going on. And they are also recorded and will be available to be viewed 24/7 by all students who are registered for the course. At this time, the clubhouse is going to be open for all scheduled competitions. These will be live in-person events, but will also be live streamed and recorded and will be available on YouTube. And then I really want to call your attention to the last one. We will not be opening the clubhouse for any Zoom presentations, at least through the end of February. They will be conducted from home. Links will be, to attend the Zoom session will be sent out usually on the Wednesday before the presentation to all members. As of now, these are all member-only presentations. They will also be recorded for future viewing by club members, but will not be available on YouTube. All right. There may be some exceptions to that. I know we do have one club member who is going to be giving a presentation, and we may make his presentation available on YouTube. But for the most part, when we have presenters, they're outside presenters, and they don't want us to put them out on YouTube. They want them to be members only. All right, some other COVID considerations. All persons that are attending Friday meetings in person through the end of February are required to wear a mask at all times we're in the building, no matter what their vaccination status. As for classes, we are requiring all students and helpers who attend live classes to wear a mask at all times in the building, again, no matter what their vaccination status. And we do strongly encourage all non-vaccinated members and students to attend meetings and classes virtually, at least for the time being. And, you know, if you've tested positive for COVID in the last several days, please attend those events virtually and don't come in. We're trying to do as best we can to make the clubhouse as safe as possible for everyone. All right, some upcoming competitions. On January 21st, we have a nature and pictorial competition. Again, we have converted all of the remaining competitions for this club year, that is through the end of March, to digital with one exception. And I'll talk about that in a second. And that means that the deadline for those competitions is 9 days before the actual competition. So the deadline for the January 21st Nature and Pictorial is January 12th. Those entries should be submitted through Shutterscore. On February 4th, we have a black and white and pictorial competition. Again, the deadline is January 26th. February 11th is the one exception. It's a B competition, and it will be a print competition. And that's really the only print competition we have left. And then finally, February 25th is a photojournalism night. And the deadline for that, photojournalism, the deadline is 3 days before the photojournalism event. So that will be February 22nd. Some upcoming speakers. We do have a couple lined up, but I only put one on the announcements. January 14th, next Friday, we will have a members-only Zoom session with Mark Bowie, and he'll be talking about winterscapes, the art of photographing snow and ice. And again, I want to remind you, the clubhouse will not be open. We will be sending out Zoom links probably on January 12th. We have started winter classes. The Fundamentals of Photography class started 2 days ago, Wednesday night. Photoshop starts tomorrow morning. And then a week from Monday, we start intermediate Photoshop. One other project that we're working on is the Mansfield book project. We have worked with a lady who works for the Reformatory, and she's planning to put together a book with photographs from over time period of Mansfield Reformatory. You can now enter your photos into Shutterscore. So just get into Shutterscore and look down the list of, it'll say competitions, but look down that list and you'll see Mansfield Reformatory. I do want to remind you that this is for current members only. Members can submit up to 5 photos. We're asking you to keep your original images sized at a minimum of 8 by 10 at 300 DPI. So if your image is selected, we need high quality photos to go into the book. But when you submit the photos, we want you to resize those submissions to meet the Shutterscore requirements, and that is no longer than 1280 pixels on the longest side. Otherwise, you're liable to overwhelm the Shutterscore system. The system will be open, that particular project will be open until February 15th for submissions. So if you have pictures from Mansfield Reformatory and you want to see if they might make the book, get them in before February 15th. Okay, we invite you to watch this and most of our Friday evening meetings at your convenience at our CPS YouTube channel. You can follow the link that's on the CPS website homepage, or you can open YouTube and search for Cleve Photographic. And again, we invite you to subscribe to our channel so you'll be notified whenever a new video is posted. All right, so again, welcome to everyone that's at home and the few people that are here. This is our third people competition for the 2021-2022 year. Tonight we have 81 images, 33 of them in the people category and 48 in the pictorial image category. And we will be reading comments on all of them. So let's take a look at our judges for this evening. And this is the reason I did my notes, because trying to read it off the screen up there is almost impossible. Our first judge is Walter Grossman. Walter has been a lover of nature and an avid outdoorsman for years, and he always has a camera accompanying him to record his adventures. In his quest to produce fine prints, the cameras became larger and larger, leading to his work with large format cameras. He divided his time between color and black and white, but in 1977 he abandoned color to concentrate on mastering monochrome photography. Peter Walk, representing Walter, started representing Walter and introduced him to Ansel Adams. Adams was a big influence, and in 1981, Grossman compiled a portfolio for critique by Adams, who referred to them as a great set of photographs, and that's got to be quite a compliment coming from Ansel Adams. They maintain a close relationship until Adam's death in 1984. Walter is still represented by the Walk Photographic Gallery. His work is included in major permanent collections, including the Amico corporate offices, the Gateway Corporation, Citicorp, Texas A&M, Ilford Photographic Corporation, and the private Jordan Collection and Marmolia Collection. He has taught at CPS and as well as Lorraine Community College and has been a longtime CPS judge. His work has been included in many local and international exhibits, including the Valley Arts Center, the Walk Gallery, and the Cleveland Museum of Art, as well as the Gallery for Fine Art in New Orleans, the Photographic Gallery of Palo Alto, California, and the International Fine Art Photography Exposition in Toronto, Canada. So that's our first judge, Walter Grossman, and who'll be reading? Okay, Eric is going to be reading for Walter. Wendy Hess, our second judge. Wendy is an assistant curator at the Akron Art Museum. She has coordinated traveling shows organized by other institutions. She ran a 501c3 that acquired assistive equipment for special needs students. She has written a number of grants and has edited and written for script type publications. She's a regular visitor to galleries and museums in Northeast Ohio, and she has 2 children and helps care for her ailing senior parents. That's Wendy, and who'll be reading? Dave is going to be reading for Wendy. And then finally, our final judge, Steve Manchuk. Steve became interested in photography through his childhood friend and often CPS judge, Glenn Petranek. He bought his first camera in 1967 and soon after set up a home darkroom. He was both a school newspaper and yearbook photographer. In 1973, he attended the Naval School of Photography and spent 4 years in the Navy as an aerial recon photographer. Beginning in 1977, he spent more than a decade working as a part-time wedding, school portrait, and commercial photographer. He has been judging for many years, often with Glenn Petranek. He bought his first digital camera in May of 2000. He and Glenn assembled a slideshow of digital works and became advocates for digital photography. Majority of Steve's work is from northeastern Ohio through his favorite away from home, although his favorite away from home destination is New England. And Bill Keaton will be reading for Steve. All right, the judging criteria, again, for those that might not be familiar with our judging criteria, each judge will score an image on a scale of 5 to 9. The final score for each image is the total of all 3 judges' scores, and images are judged on 3 criteria: impact, composition, and technique. All right, so with that, let's get started with the people images.
Walter says the composition, pose, and facial expression are very good. The image is generally a success. The difference between a good image and a very good image are usually small things. The viewer's eye is often distracted by light objects. Here, the highlighted hand and cup distract the attention away from the face. Where the highlights brought down in value and or the cup and hand held lower, there would be more emphasis on the most important element of the image, the face. Also, printing a bit darker or possibly slightly less contrast might enhance the subject without losing the pleasant expression.
The image is called 5 O'Clock Tea by Joseph Miko, 22 points.
Wendy says, this image has visual interest, but would benefit from a different crop and better clarity and contrast. There's a lot of other things going on around the subject, so a much tighter crop focusing on the upper half of the body and the accordion could help. Or perhaps something perhaps softening and blurring the background.
The image is called 97-Year-Old Accordionist Ray by Bonnie Luxo, 21 points.
Steve says, a nice capture of expression here. Casual and inviting is the mood. Subject placement is good. As far as the casual portrait goes, this one works.
The image is called Always Laughing by Robert Boyle, 22 points.
The image captures the excitement of the moment very well. Dynamic pictures like this are not easy to get. The color and the exposure are quite good. The photographer, however, should control the eye of the viewer and keep it concentrated on the main part of the image with only occasional glimpses elsewhere. The singer behind the main subject keeps pulling the eye away from the main issue, only to find him too light and out of focus. Again, distractions in a photograph are often provided by high values. Darkening the second figure to the right would still convey what is going on without drawing unneeded attention.
The image is called Angus by Bill Keaton, 23 points, second place.
Wendy says, a very nice portrait that captures the subject's expression well and makes good use of diagonals and variations. The tilt of the hat, the subtle tilt of the head, the different height and angle of the shoulders to lend visual interest and keep it from being overly symmetrical.
The image is called Anton Galvin by Fran Marino, 23 points, second place.
Colorful portrait of a subject who appears to be gratified by a successful jump, Steve says. I am assuming this is a story implied here. For improvement, the placement of the face is a bit too centered. The merge of the golf cart top in the background is unfortunate. The bright green background darkens the subject a bit too much. A closer crop of the face and jump gear would be my focus.
The image is called Back to Earth by Andrew Pike, 20 points.
Walter says, this picture has really captured the character of the subject beautifully. The color, composition, and exposure are exact. The only suggestion I could possibly offer is this. Many photographers routinely darken the corners and edges of an image ever so slightly in an effort to keep the viewer's eyes from drifting away from the center of interest. If it is done well, it works, and the viewer doesn't even realize he or she has been controlled. It's a small matter, but if done on the right side of this image, it could enhance the image even more.
The image is called Battle at Burton by Dave Saborik, 24 points, first place.
Wendy says, I find this an engaging shot, capturing an interesting and slightly amusing moment in time as two people jockey to get shots of the sunflower field. The sharp clarity in the background and more blur behind them is nice too. Because it is a side shot though, the faces are obstructed and the cropping at bottom is in a somewhat odd place.
The image is called Candid Camera by Dennis Wirt, 20 points.
Steve says good action capture with a focused, concentrating subject. The other subjects lend to the story of a game in progress with non-players in the frame. The bright bench pulls the eye a bit from the main feature, but the cluttered bench is just a typical example of the sidelines at a game. Tack-sharp background distracts, but could be lessened with lower ISO and a larger f-stop if the camera allows.
The image is called Coach, Player, Referee by Dan Hennessy, 19 points.
Walter says this is another example of a very good representation of a face and the character behind it. The photographer has done very well. I, as the viewer, would like to reach in and feel the texture. Very small suggestions might be to lower the value of the bottom of the nose very slightly, and possibly tone down the stark white on the right side of his chin whiskers to match the left. Sorry if I'm getting carried away.
The image is called Concern by Mike Kopkis, 21 points.
Wendy says, a nicely balanced shot with good angles and well cropped. The clarity could be a bit better. It has contemplative feeling though also leaves the viewer wishing to see the subject's face.
The image is called Contemplating Eternity by Mike Kopkis, 20 points.
Steve says this is well lit and a good choice of monochrome treatment for this image. The eye placement is dead center, which makes for a slightly less dramatic composition. A bit of tension could be added by tilting the camera and offsetting the subject. Tack sharp portrait.
The image is called Enjoying a Pipe by Bill Keaton, 24 points, first place.
Walter says the subject was posed and captured beautifully. His expression, smile, and eyes are just great. The tonalities from the edge of the face to the edge of the image on the viewer's right are ideal. However, the same is not true for the left side of the portrait. The shirt, arm, and especially the background are major force for pulling the viewer's eye away from the face. Correcting this would really enhance this image.
The image is called Hey Jude by Leslie Nutt, 22 points.
Wendy says, this is a cute slice of life picture with a lot of character. Normally I'm a fan of close cropping, but this photo I'd like to see a bit more space on the left side as it feels crowded. Alternatively, I'd like to see how the image would look with a much closer crop to focus more of the boys and less of the details of the setting.
The image is called Ice Cream Boys by Rich Foley, 22 points.
Unusual angle and background, Steve says, but the story is clear. This portrait is under a bridge spanning a creek or riverbed. The higher key approach is obvious with the less than black shadows. The structure behind the subject is a bit sharp for popping the subject, and the support braces intersecting the head is somewhat distracting. Shallow focus would be a better option here.
The image is called Jack by Karen Kritzer, 21 points.
Walter says it looks like a well-planned and well-executed photograph. Good color and geometry. The blue of the dress is enhanced by the blues and purples of the blossoms, and the model certainly knows how to pose. The darkness of the LL, UL, and UR corners, lower left, and upper right corners, serves to hold the viewer's attention where it belongs. Darkening the lower right corner a bit would complete the effect. Specular reflections from the complexion can be a good thing, but if the reflected areas are too large, the result can be detracted from the image, or can detract from the image. The speculars on the face are probably within bounds, however, the one on the body may be a bit too much.
The image is called Lauren by Susan Bestel, 22 points.
Wendy says, this is a lovely capture and more than the sum of its parts. It's a simple shot, but the expression, the flying hair, and the background all work together. I personally think it could also work well if it was cropped up just above the pink line, putting the full focus on the face and expression and cutting out the distracting lines in the background.
The image is called Movin' by Rich Foley, 23 points, second place.
Steve says, casual portrait of a subject seemingly oblivious to the camera. The composition and lighting are great. The stairs helping to anchor the subject and give some idea as to where this location might be, possibly a church or a centuries-old public building. For a vertical composition, the feeling is still very relaxed.
The image is called On the Steps by Debbie Leesky, 23 points, second place.
Walter says the moment has been captured. The image was well set up and captured with great cooperation from the subject. But care must be taken during printing. Overly highlighted complexion, even with a baby, can produce a washed out look. In addition, the left viewer's background is a little on the stark side. With digital editing, these highlights can be easily controlled without defeating the sparkling quality of the picture. By the way, great eyes.
The image is called One of Those Days by Leslie Nutt, 21 points.
Wendy says, a very nicely done portrait with a great capture of expression. It projects a sense of style. Wish there was more definition separating the arm from the similarly muted brick wall behind it. A bit more sharpness on the back arm and a slightly different crop. I find cutting the front hand off mid-finger a little disconcerting.
The image is called Sophisticated Lady by Angeli Persons, 20 points.
Steve says, nice attempt at an action shot in a well-lit pond or lake. The angle is good. For added drama, the subject's expression could be better timed as the eye is almost closed. The water blur is good, although it seems to straddle a blur rather than a freeze. To freeze this would require a faster shutter. To exaggerate the blur, a slower shutter.
The image is called Splash by Marge Brady, 21 points.
Walter says a dynamite picture. The lighting and the colors are excellent. The placement of the subject is effective and the subject herself is interesting. This is a very successful image. Nothing more to be recommended.
The image is called Standing Tall by Debbie Leesky, 23 points, second place.
Wendy says, a cute shot, and the kid's really rocking those glasses. I'd like to see more space above the head. A close crop is nice, but that is a bit too close and could use a little room to breathe.
The image is called Top Gun by Mick Russo, 22 points.
Studio portrait that is well lit, well posed, Steve says, with colors that work very well between subject and background. To capture the pretty face and subject motion in one click of the shutter is technically to be applauded here. The hot spot on the upper portion of the dress is my only criticism. In a raw file, this might be able to be addressed if the exposure is not too excessive for the highlights. Well done.
The image is called Twirl by Jackie Sieski, 24 points, first place.
Walter says this is another fine portrait and character study. The color is fine as it is. The exposure is also fine as it is, but I can't help wonder if printing it a bit darker would give it more dramatic effect. But that's just me. It's really fine print. Good job.
The image is called Yankee Peddler Reenactor by Dave Saborik, 23 points, second place.
Wendy says, this is a nice slice of life shot and does a solid job of capturing the expressions of the subjects. I'd like to see better clarity and contrast.
The image is called All in One Piece by Andrew Pike, 21 points.
Steve says, nice pose and placement of the subjects and figurines. A thought on the lighting for a female subject. The single source lighting creates the dark fall off on part of the face, neck, and shoulder. A bit softer lighting or placing a reflector on the dark shadows would help. Additionally, the third sculpture piece is lost a bit in the dark shadows. I will add that arranging these four subjects is a challenge and deserves further experimentation.
The image is called Caroline's People by Fran Marino, 23 points, second place.
Walter says this is really an excellent image. The lighting is great and the dancers are positioned very effectively. The color is beautiful and the tonalities direct the viewer's eye exactly where the photographer wants it. This is a great example of how a full tonal range can really enhance the impact of an image. Excellent job, and the subjects have some credit also.
The image is called Dancing in the Garden by Susan Bestel, 24 points, first place.
Wendy says, this is a nice direct image with good capture of expression. It also leaves me wondering what that is in the subject's holding in his hands. I'd like to see a bit more space given to the elbow there since it's cut off a bit awkwardly right at the edge.
The image is called Drone Guy by Angeli Persons, 20 points.
Steve says satisfying capture of a little tyke enjoying an autumn day as the leaves fall. The warm colors certainly evoke the mood of fall. The shallow depth keeps the trees from becoming a distraction, but at the same time adding interest. Nice touch of adding more compositional room above the young boy's head to imply he is a little person. It is not a hard and fast rule, but a good one to consider when composing for little ones.
The image is called Fall Day by Jackie Sieski, 23 points, second place.
Walter says this is a very well done shot of action. The main subject is handled ideally, and so is the background. The characters in the background add depth to the action without being a distraction. The fact that they are in soft focus and not too light serve to enhance and outline the main subject. The sharpness of the main subject is also very commendable.
The image is called Intensity by Robert Boyle, 23 points, second place.
Wendy says, it's easy to get a sugar overdose from pictures of adorable little children. I really like this shot and feel that it works quite nicely. I like the pose and downcast face, even the way the detailed soles of the boots are captured so clearly. While I'd prefer a bit more contrast between the sitter and background, and that white top is tough to capture. The deck and marsh behind the little girl make a great, excellent setting that enhance the photo.
The image is called Quiet Contemplation by Karen Kritzer, 22 points.
Clever placement of subject in this casual portrait, Steve says. The flash on camera is harsh, but may have been the only light to use for this particular setting. The lower left portion of the frame could be darkened in post to avoid the distraction from the main subject.
The image is called Rachel as an Angel by Jen Cockrell, 20 points. And that concludes the people portion of the competition. Now we'll take a look at the pictorial images.
Walter says this is a very well composed image. However, is a very difficult scene to render. There are really two scenes here, the upper 25% and then the rest. The lighting in each is different, and each produces a completely different effect. Even the color is different. The photographer has done a very commendable job here, and I hope he or she would continue to study the image and let it evolve, because this image has tremendous potential. This might even be worth considering in black and white. At any rate, it would make a great project.
The image is called Bedford Falls by Rick Mills, 22 points, honorable mention.
Wendy says, the trees are pretty and the variety of colors are nice in this shot. However, this work lacks a focal point. It needs something to draw the viewer in and create more visual interest.
The image is called Birch Cluster by John Downey, 19 points.
Steve says a nice capture of water in motion using a slow shutter and applying monochrome treatment in post. Good composition, although the lower left foreground may be heavier than needed. It is a suitable frame, however, it just may be more than necessary. The lack of detail in the surrounding trees and rocks focuses your attention to the water.
The image is called Black and White Berea Falls by Chris Bosworth, 23 points, third place.
Walter says the idea behind this image is very good. Bringing the subject in from the background is very effective. There are, however, a couple of issues. As the subject emerges from the background, it comes into focus, but then as it approaches the center, it loses focus again and then regains it at the blossom. The other issue, which is more subjective, is the color. The color is subdued and rather subtle. Perhaps brighten the reds without changing the hue would add impact to the overall.
The image is called Buds to You by Bob Kowaleski, 24 points, second place.
Wendy says, I really enjoy the overall impression of this close-up and find those different colored lights in the background add to the image. I do wish that the leaves were a bit lighter and sharper, though, and that the teeny piece of flower on the left edge of the image was cropped out.
The image is called Christmas Rose by Angeli Persons, 20 points.
Steve says blue skies and skeletal treetops to frame it are a common theme. In this image, the tree details are too small to appreciate. The bottom portion of the image with the boats and tree line are also a very fine but do not add much interest. Compositionally cutting off the bottoms of the main trees seems a bit unnatural as well. The jet trails may or may not be seen as added interest depending on the viewer.
The image is called Contrail Through Trees by Dan Hennessy, 19 points.
Walter says the photographer needs to be congratulated for getting the subject to pose in the ideal position to get this picture. Animal pictures are always a challenge. The color contrast between the subject and the background is excellent and very effective. However, the focus on the deer is a bit soft, which loses the potential 3D effect that a super sharp subject would have against a softer background.
The image is called Deer View by Maria Diaconou, 19 points.
Wendy says, definitely a dramatic shot and very nice capture. I'd like to see the cropping tighter on the left side, but other than that, I don't see anything to change.
The image is called Defying Gravity by Marge Brady, 21 points.
Steve says another familiar autumn view captured well both compositionally and exposure-wise. This wider view challenges the viewer as to what the main subject is, the trestle, the water, or the fall trees. I wish to comment that this view is pleasing, but at a wider lens setting, bringing all the elements together to create a balanced image with impact is no easy task.
The image is called Fall at Berea Falls by Ron Werman, 20 points.
Walter says the concept here is excellent. A nebulous background with sparkling color and contrasting a subject almost abstract. Unfortunately, the right half of the subject is out of focus, which again sacrifices the potential 3D effect they would have had if the 3D effect that would have added much more impact to the image.
The image is called Floating Feather in Gold by Joseph Miko, 22 points, honorable mention.
Wendy says, while this scene is inherently pretty, the photographer has done an exceptional job with it, catching it from an angle that offers an optimal view. The movement of the water cascading over the rocks is captured beautifully, as are the colors in the changing leaves.
The image is called Foggy Upstate New York River by Richard Schneider, 24 points, second place.
Steve says a clever foursome captured well and possibly created in post from a single subject. Regardless, it is well crafted, and considering the bright sky as a background, the darker bird details are not lost here. Well done on that score.
The image is called Four Raptors Jumping on a Tree by Donna Schneider, 24 points, second place.
Walter says this is great composition, a vantage that is seldom, if ever, seen. It is easy for me to say, but if the picture would have been taken at a time of day when less light is coming from the sky or the thin cloud wasn't there, the effect might have been much more dramatic. But that's easy for me to say, maybe not so easy to do.
The image is called George's Profile by Robert Boyle, 22 points, honorable mention.
Wendy says, this image has a very nice detail and contrast, with every smudge, scrap, and scratch showing up clearly. It definitely brings the viewer back in time. Well, my biggest complaint about many of these images is the need to crop tighter. I'd like to see just a bit less of a crop on this one.
The image is called Golden Age of Radio by Dennis Wirt, 21 points.
Hands at work is always a common theme, as shown here, Steve says. Compositionally, it is well crafted. Technically, it has a few areas for improvement. The harsh highlights on the corn take a bit away from an otherwise perfect exposure. The hands are captured well, but as far as capturing action, we miss the actual process of what task was being performed when the shutter fired.
The image is called Grandmother's Hands by Andrew Pike, 19 points.
Walter says this is another well-composed image with good geometry and good color. The background indicates the setting without intruding on the subject. The only suggestions might be to tone down the stark white of the blouse because it distracts from the rest of the subject. Also, darkening the up corner would help keep the viewer's eye from moving away from the subject.
The image is called Harpist Jody by Susan Bestel, 20 points.
Wendy says, this shot appears to be a young, wild, bighorn sheep that's been tagged so it can be tracked. I'm a bit torn on this piece. I think it was taken from quite a distance, and captured an animal like this in the wild is always challenging. So just getting it, but getting it with nice detail, is a bit of a trophy. However, from a pure aesthetic viewpoint, it reads as kind of flat.
The image is called House Arrest, Prisoner Number 13 by Bob Kowaleski, and that's 19 points.
Steve says, hard to find fault in this capture as it has everything. Great exposure, simple composition, lighting that is very natural and pleasing, and an expression of reflection for the older subject and one of disbelief in the young one. Did I mention the color is spot on as well? Tack sharp, too.
The image is called Let Me Fix My Hair by Jackie Sayeski, 25 points, first place.
Walter says the idea of a near abstract is very good, and the exposure and color are also very good. But unless I'm missing something, the lack of sharpness just doesn't do the composition justice.
The image is called Lighted Tree at the Zoo by Jen Cockrell, 17 points.
Wendy says, this is a good example of taking something old and gritty and finding the visual interest in it. It's nicely cropped and the details are well captured, though some areas have much better definition than others. The dark and white contrast nicely.
The image is called Mansfield Reformatory by Bonnie Luxo, 21 points.
Steve says a lot of subject matter here, but it holds together fairly well. with so many objects calling for the viewer's attention. The high voltage tower tells a story that although the setting seems remote, it is not too remote. Good exposure overall. I wonder if a panorama treatment might have been even more dramatic.
The image is called New Zealand Pasture by Maria Diaconou, 19 points.
Walter says this is a very simple but very effective composition. The color speaks for itself and supplies the necessary contrast for the image. The foreground subject is reasonably sharp, but could be a little sharper. The background is tastefully out of focus, but might have been much more effective if everything green would have been rendered a little darker, with the buds still being subtly visible behind the subject. This modification might very well add more impact to an already good image.
The image is called Purple Garlic Flower by Ron Werman, 20 points.
Wendy says, this piece captures the texture of the moss very nicely, as well as the spots of light coming through. The shape is interesting, but the moss and bark might benefit from more of a close-up approach.
The image is called Roots by Rick Mills, 21 points.
Tack sharp and dramatic presentation of this frozen specimen, Steve says. Good placement and simple color contrast of green and magenta create a balanced image. Not even bothered that the subject is almost perfectly centered. Sometimes you can get away with a fairly centered subject.
The image is called Rosebud Ice by Vicky Wirt, 24 points, second place.
This image represents a mood, Walter says, with its near pastel colors and subtle blends of yellows and greens. Even the yellow petals against the yellow background is appealing. Normally I find a soft focus subject objectionable, but in this impressionistic atmosphere, it works.
The image is called Rudmeckia Ballerina, by Vicky Wirt, 21 points.
Wendy says, this is a nice landscape. It's the sort of image that could easily be lynched, but
Cliched.
has, what's that?
Cliched.
Cliched, oh, thank you. But has been definitely handled to avoid that. The composition is really well balanced, and the lines and shapes created by the different elements, triangles, strong diagonals come together perfectly.
The image is called St. George Island Sunrise by Donna Schneider, 23 points, third place.
Steve says sunsets are favored highly for their drama and mood. This one has a calming effect like so many warm-colored setting sun images. Placement is good, although the blank sky at the upper frame adds a little interest. Cropping it, however, would center the shoreline in the frame, which is not usually a good thing compositionally.
The image is called Sunset by John Downey, 19 points.
Walter says this is a simple but extremely good composition. It's loaded with color that is contrasted with other color, all of which is natural and not contrived. It also shows contrast between the two subjects via what they are doing, official work responsibility versus having pure fun. And the two subjects are literally on top of each other.
The image is called Working 9 to 5 by Fran Marino, 20 points.
Wendy says, this is a lovely landscape that captures a brief moment and seems to go on forever. This image has much more detail than apparent at first glance. I like the way the rocks in the foreground and the light in the clouds just above and over and in the far background pop out in relation to the rest of the darker, more muted tones.
The image is called Cadillac Mountain Sunset by Donna Schneider, 21 points.
Steve says a sad capture of a discarded mode of transport. Black and white adds to the mood of abandonment. Good subject placement as it makes the car heap seem like a passive observer in the desert vastness. Good exposure and sharpness throughout in this wide-angle rendering.
The image is called Desolation, Death Valley by Bill Keaton, 23 points, third place.
Walter says, this picture makes excellent use of horizontal light and the unusually similar color of late day sunlight and artificial light. The result is very pleasing and warm. Beside the contrast provided by the reds and oranges against the blue of the sky and the water, there is contrast supplied by the whiter light on the church and the bell tower versus the warmer light on the lower buildings. All in all, this is a very successful image.
The image is called Evening in Rovan by Dennis Wirt, 22 points, honorable mention.
Wendy says, this landscape captures the color of fall and some nice reflections, and has good resolution for the distant landscape. With all of that, though, it reads as rather flat, lacking contrast and depth of those colors.
The image is called Fall Reflection by John Downey, 20 points.
Steve says a very sharp and dramatic presentation of these always interesting pods. The color background, although busy with color and form, contrasts nicely with the brown and white features of the main subjects. The placement is especially balanced for the eye.
The image is called Falling Seeds by Vicky Wirt, 25 points, first place.
Walter says the horizontal and warm nature of the light make the mood of this picture very appealing. The scene was also well composed and exposed. The salmon and grays of the distance is offset by the reds and orange of the foreground to add some needed contrast. The dramatic sky in the distance only adds to the composition. All in all, a very well made photograph.
The image is called Grand Canyon Overlook by Richard Schneider, 23 points, third place.
Wendy says, this is a fun, creative approach to showing the holiday lights downtown. Getting good shots of lights at nighttime is tough, and the lights on this tree could be a bit sharper, but the rays radiating from the small white lights work surprisingly well with the rest of the image.
The image is called Holiday Lights and Terminal Tower by Ron Werman, 23 points, third place.
Steve says a good capture of a dramatic shoreline under dreary skies. The centering of the horizon makes this less than effective compositionally. Removing half of the upper portion of the sky would move the horizon off center and help the overall composition. The areas on the far left and right of the frame could be experimented with to see what can be removed and what can remain. The area of interest seems to be the dock blocks stretching out to the water. Perhaps a square format?
The image is called Lake Michigan in the Fall by Leslie Nutt, 21 points.
Walter says this is a ready-made subject that had to be easy to compose. It works, but is a little flat and could stand a little color enhancement to spark it up a little without washing out the lighter areas. Not a bad idea, though, and well exposed.
The image is called Leaded Flowers by Dan Hennessy, 19 points.
Wendy says, nice shot of the Cuyahoga at Lock 29, with a good capturing the movement of the water. The piece has a stormy gloom feeling to it, with its cloudy skies, shades of gray, and particularly bare trees. The bits of blue poking through the clouds suggest that more contrast could add some pop to this image. Heightening the color saturation could do this while maintaining a stormy feel. It could also stand some cropping on the left.
The image is called Lock 29 Rapids by Rick Mills, 23 points, third place.
Sharp and punchy image of the specimen, Steve says, with a lot of vignetting applied in post. The dark area under the body seems to make the feet look detached or the body as if it were floating. Other than that, a simple yet effective image.
The image is called Lone Bird by Marge Brady, 24 points, second place.
Walter says this image is quite similar to a previous one, only on a smaller scale. It is lighted by mostly natural light of the blue hour by the time between sunset and dusk when the red glow of the sun no longer bathes the land. This picture is particularly appealing because of its serenity, but still possesses clarity and good color even in the waning light. Congratulations to the photographer.
The image is called Manarola Blue by Dave Saborik, 22 points, honorable mention.
Wendy says, this vivid image really grabs the viewer with its deep colors and simple, strong shapes. In fact, the shapes are so flattering, the colorful that is not for the boat. It could almost read as an abstraction as well as landscape. It is undeniably beautiful and works very well, though I'm left wondering what it would have looked like if taken just a bit earlier to give it a bit more definition.
The image is called Morning Calm by Bob Kowaleski, 21 points.
Steve says a simple pose of this koala with flash on camera, taken in captivity most likely. The harsh shadow thrown by an on-camera flash and the fading dark background are unfortunate byproducts when no other light is available. I would really have given this more attention if the koala was looking at the camera. The pose is rather static, but I realize this is a capture during a meal, not a portrait session.
The image is called Panda Feeding 2 by Maria Diaconou, 20 points.
Walter says the photographer has done a very good job in representing this scene. The exposure is excellent. The color may or may not be accurate, but it doesn't matter. It's effective. I really like the chandelier against the dark sky. Everything is sharp, and most of all, the verticals are vertical, no convergence, which is important in architectural type photography. Another congratulations is due to this photographer as well.
And the image is called Playhouse Square by Joseph Miko, 22 points, honorable mention.
Wendy says, a wonderful capture of this little warbler in mid-song, taken with enough detail to see everything well. The arching shape of the branch adds to the work. I think the bird is strong enough to handle a tighter cropping on the right.
The image is called Singing for All to Hear by Debbie Leesky, 21 points.
Harsh, moody, gritty image of the Cleveland skyline, Steve says. The sky almost indicates a fire over the city. As much as the lower portion and upper portion of this composition are quite different, the water between them connects the elements to make a cohesive picture. Sharp as a tack, the heavy vignetting obvious but not too distracting.
The image is called Skyline Sunrise by Joe DiStefano, 23 points, third place.
Walter says it's cold and the snow is coming down. The scene has been captured. I can't tell on the screen how sharp the image is, but it's certainly representative of the mood in winter. I do like the texture and the muted reflections in the dark water.
The image is called Snow by Sarah Whalen, 20 points.
Wendy says, nighttime shots of any sort of architecture are challenging and this shot does a good job at capturing the dramatic nighttime lighting on this bridge. It trails down to the right, creating a curving line of lights just visible amid the darker background. The bridge's simple, clean lines don't have the inherent warm and fuzzy visual approach of some other subject matter, but the photographer's done a nice job with it.
The image is called Sullivan Bridge by Rich Foley, 22 points, honorable mention.
Steve says, a product shot with a dramatic foreground framing the label of the bottle. The blue-hued, sharp and bright capture of the wine glass is in heavy contrast to the darker, warmer colored label, which could use a bit of brightening in the yellow area or yellow text areas. Very good placement of the subjects overall.
The image is called Wine and Glass by Mike Kopkis, 22 points, honorable mention. And that concludes tonight's event. If you'd like more information about competing or to join the Cleveland Photographic Society, we invite you to visit our website, www.clevelandphoto.org. We want to thank all of our judges and those readers who read the judges' comments. We appreciate your effort. And again, thanks to all who entered. If you'd like to send us your feedback, you can send it to info@clevelandphoto.org. So please stay safe, everyone. Again, if you do come to the club, please remember to bring a mask. And like I say, stay safe. Good night.